What's going on with the Leafs pending UFAs and which prospects are they targeting in the draft? Let's get into all of that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centered podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morisuti. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Bet you're feeling pretty good about your MVP wager you made the other day, your Conn Smythe wager for Sergei Bobrovsky. I did see, I woke up this morning, those odds shortened mightily from where they were. And after last night's performance there, where again, stellar in goal, didn't have to be too sharp, but only one got by him. Another terrific performance by the Panthers. They are now up 2-0, and he's got to be the front runner at this point for Conn Smythe. No, you got to be feeling good about that bet.
Yeah, I'm looking right now on FanDuel. He is minus 160 to win the Conn Smythe.
And he started at like plus 4 something, I think, at the start of the Cup final. So within 2 games, his odds have shrunk to minus now odds. Like odds on favorite now. It's wild.
Yeah, I'm actually just double checking what odds I got him at because I literally, like, as soon as that first game went, I'm like, yeah, I better go do this now. I'm actually being offered a cash out right now, which I'm not going to take. I got a plus 225.
That's not bad. Not bad. Double your money, assuming things go well. I mean, I'm seeing quotes starting to come out from the game now, and Connor McDavid said, "Yeah, I'm looking forward to people doubting us again. Going to try and use that as fuel for them heading home." But as they say, Dave, team doesn't really lose the series until they lose at home. So we'll see what the Edmonton Oilers have in store for Florida when they get to oil country. I will say this. We kind of gave Evan Rodriguez a little flack at the beginning. Remember we did our power ranking I think it was more so like
I had him higher than you on my power ranking.
To be fair, our power ranking was more so like players we want to see win a cup as opposed to most skilled. But he was dead last on my list. This guy's been unbelievable. Like another couple goals tonight, scored a goal. I looked it up. I mean, it's been a low scoring series, but through the first 2 games, he's got 38% of the goals scored. Wild. Evan Rodriguez, former Maple Leaf great. Evan Rodriguez. Unbelievable. He was a Maple Leaf longer than Jared McCann was. Technically, he was.
God damn it. Both. Just don't even remind me. Like we're just seeing like the types of players it takes to win it. You can those goals were nothing special, right? Like first goal, thank you, Evan Bouchard, for the nice gift, and throws it on net, gets it by Skinner. I think it took a deflection on the way in. But the second goal, right place, right time, get in the dirty areas. It's what you need to do.
Yep. And then, nice, win along the boards for the empty net goal. 2 games in a row now we've seen that happen. So, yeah, man, this Florida Panthers team, they're good, brother. They're good, good squad, and they are ready to win a championship. And they're 2 games away now, up 2-0 in their best of 7. Okay, so let's get into today's topic for the Maple Leafs. And essentially, I want to take a look at what's going on with the Leafs in terms of their unrestricted free agents and where things stand, because there's quite a few of them that are out there right now, and we haven't necessarily heard too many updates on what's going on with these guys. We've heard a couple here and there, like there was that LeBron report where both Domi and Bertuzzi were apparently asking for an absurd amount of cash. And then Tree Living, basically through Dreger, told us, yeah, if that's what they're asking for, I ain't going to get it here. So that might have been a little bit of an exaggerated report that he got a little nugget from a certain agent to put those numbers out into the public sphere. Doesn't sound like that's going to be the number that they close in at if they do find a deal. Then there was a bit of an update on Edmondson too, that there is interest, but he might want to test the market. So basically, Dave, what I want to do here for the next couple of minutes, kind of like a return percentages game. So the percent odds of this pending UFA returning. So there's really, you could say, when it comes to unrestricted free agents, 5 that might be able to return. 5 that the Leafs could consider bringing back. To me, there's only 5. Like Samsonov, the team's already cut bait with him. If you listen to Brad Living's press conference at the end of the year, he basically said, Sammy ain't coming back. He's not part of this future. Absolutely not. So I don't think he is. Obviously, TJ Brody, I doubt is coming back. Mark Giordano, I think probably going to retire maybe. So to me, there's only 5 guys. You tell me if there's anyone else that's a pending UFA for the Leafs that deserves to be in this category. But I think Domi, Bertuzzi, Lyubushkin, Joel Edmondson, and Martin Jones could be 5 players that the Maple Leafs could circle back on and try and see if there's something that they can get done. They would like to bring those guys back. I'm not talking about RFAs, just the UFAs. I don't know if you want to take a look at the list and see if there's another guy who maybe you think the Leafs could be interested in. But for me, that was pretty much it, those 5 guys. So why don't we take a peek at these players individually? We'll go one by one, and we can give a percentage of chances we think that they do return to the Maple Leafs. So let's start up front and start with Max Domi, because Domi, interestingly enough, actually spoke with Lance Hornby over the weekend. There's a couple of quotes in Hornby's column over the weekend, and Domi confirmed that he is interested in returning to Toronto. He's mentioned that before. He wants to be a long-term Maple Leaf, and that contract extension talks are ongoing, but he doesn't really have his hands on. It's more his agent and his the GM, and he wasn't going to negotiate in the media. So didn't really get much out of it. But other than that, there are talks ongoing. So at this point, Dave, if you had to throw a percentage on it of whether or not Domi is a Maple Leaf next season, what's your percent look like?
I'm going like 65%.
I like that number.
Anything higher than that, I think is too much of you're getting too much into like that. You're really confident. Look, he might want to come back, but the Leafs are also we've mentioned this internal budget, how much of the pie they got to divvy up. The numbers got to make sense. So I think they can find a way to get the right number that makes it worthwhile for both sides. I really do. And I think the term is going to be part of that as well. But I do think that I think the fact that they're talking is good, right? And getting it done, obviously ahead of time means, if you can just sell him on the fact that, you know what, don't take the chance of going to free agency. Let's get this done now.
Yeah, I think I'm right up there in the similar range. I'm going to Prices Right you and go 66% and just go $1 more, Bob.
You son of a, you know what?
Oh yeah. But for a lot of the same reasons you just mentioned, I think that Domi, both of these parties want Domi to return, and the fan base wants Domi to return. I think he can play with that snarl that the Maple Leafs are looking to add. He's a guy who's flexible within the lineup. You can play him, down the middle. You can play him on the wing. You can play him in your top 6. Wasn't the greatest third line center, but like in a pinch, you could play him at 3C, and he, did show a little bit of skill there, and made that line playable in the offensive end. So, he's got a little bit of versatility to him. So depending on the number, obviously, But I'm gonna be a little more a tad more optimistic than you that something gets done. And I do think maybe like a 3x3, 3-2-5, perhaps, maybe 4x3.5 or something like that. And Domi becomes a long-term Leaf and does come back. So I'm gonna go 66%, Bob. What about Tyler Bertuzzi?
This one, I'm not entirely sure. I'm going like 35%.
Okay.
I just feel like that he already took the 1 year prove himself deal. Is he going to be worth the 5.5? The team might pay him the 5.5 because of the type of player he is.
What type of player is he exactly, though?
He's that type of player that is supposed to, be a pest out there, get into the dirty areas, and that's that. Like I'm trying to think of like a good comparison in the Stanley Cup Finals right now. Don't know if I really have one particularly.
I mean,
But
he is a much worse version of like Matt Tkachuk, maybe, but like a much worse version of him.
He's trying to be a Tkachuk in terms of his antics. He just doesn't have the production.
Right. And even he's not as Tkachuk like either.
No,
like,
he's not as
he's Tkachuk light in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
I'm even a little lower, honestly. I think I'm at like 28% for Bertuzzi. I just don't know what he's gonna want. Like I was taking a look at what his like contract comparable might be. I was looking at guys who, were putting up points this year and what contracts they were making, guys who were in the 50 to 60 point range. And it's just I don't know if I would want to pay him more than 5 million. If he's willing to come back at around 5, I think I'd be willing to get there, but I don't think I'd like to go much higher than that. But doesn't it feel like Bertuzzi is going to be asking for more? Like he may be a circle back candidate where, similar to what happened last year, he thinks he's going to get this money, goes to free agency, doesn't really get it. So July 2, he kind of circles back and he takes the Maple Leafs 1 year offer. Maybe he doesn't necessarily have the, long-term deal or the high AAV deals that he thought he did. And maybe he does take like a 5x5 to stay in Toronto. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm not as sold that Bertuzzi returns. I also think it's very unlikely that Bertuzzi, Domi, and Marner return on this team. So I think that also factors into it because, assuming Matthew Nyes is a top 6 player, Nylander's a top 6 winger, Marner's a top 6 winger. Domi and Bertuzzi, there's really only one more spot for a top 6 winger.
Yeah.
So to bring both of them back and Marner back doesn't make a ton of sense, in my opinion. So that's where I sit on that one. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll get into the couple of defensemen that are pending UFAs and see where the Leafs might be with those two players. And then we'll take a look at some of the Maple Leafs draft targets. We got a list of names that the Leafs reportedly met with at the NHL Scouting Combine. So we'll tell you who that was on the other side. It's Mike DiStefano with Dave Morsuti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Policygenius. A lot of life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family a financial safety net to protect against some of the unknowns. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It makes choosing the right policy for your family quick and easy. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage, and some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius helps you easily compare your options from America's top insurance in just a few clicks. Their award-winning agents can even walk you through the process step by step. Your work life insurance may not offer enough protection for your family's needs, or even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. But Policygenius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. And they've got thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found their best fit for their needs. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morisuti with you, as we are each and every Monday through Friday here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, in which you can get wherever you download your audio podcasts from. You could also find us on YouTube each and every day as well. Just search up Locked On Leafs on YouTube, hit subscribe, and get your daily dose of Maple Leafs content. Little bit of a warning for later on in the week. Dave and I do plan on doing a mailbag episode where we field questions from you, the listeners. So if you guys want to throw some questions down below for us to answer, I think Friday we're going to do that episode. Do a little mailbag Friday. Go ahead, throw some questions to us down in the comment section here on YouTube, or reach out to us on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck for myself, at D_Morisuti for Dave, or the show at Locked On Leafs. So if you got any questions you want us to answer, could be about the Leafs, could be anything realistically. Throw it down and let us know, and we'll get to those on Friday. All right, Dave, we'll continue talking about some of the pending UFAs. We went through the forwards, Bertuzzi and Domi. What about the blue line? We're looking at two guys I think that the Leafs may or may not want to bring back, but two good dudes who, at the very least, there might be conversations to see what the numbers are. And those two players to me are Ilya Lyubushkin and Joel Edmondson. We'll start with the former, Ilya Lyubushkin. What are the percentage odds that he returns to the Toronto Maple Leafs?
I'm going to go low here. I'm going to go 20%, even like 10%, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm even lower than that. We haven't heard anything about Lyubushkin. I'm like 8%.
Is he like still going to play in the NHL next? Oh, he'll play in the NHL next year.
He'll be here, but I don't think he'll be here in Toronto, which is interesting because like I thought he was a decent fit. I thought he played well with the team.
I just think that you got to find ways to upgrade a bit. Like he was, as we said, he was fine, but they need more than fine, especially when where he was playing in the lineup.
Well, that's the thing. I think he'd be okay if they were able to fit him in as like a third pair right shot D-man. Like that, I think is where his role should be. And if he's willing to take the contract that would accompany that type of role, there's no chance that they, sign him back to be Morgan Riley's partner again. I don't think that helps anybody, but maybe as a third pair guy. But the fact that we haven't heard anything yet, I'm gonna, like 7-8% chance that he's going to return. What about Joel Edmondson? A little bit higher odds, in my opinion. What say you?
Yeah, I'm in like the 40% range for Joel Edmondson. Like, I think he'll want to test free agency, but I think the addition of Craig Berube has changed maybe his thought process, and I think it should, right? Like, this is someone he's won a cup with.
Mm-hmm.
He had his best years of his career, in my opinion, under Craig Berube. How can you not want to reunite and stick around for, especially because there's a clear need for this Leafs team to get a guy like him back.
Oh,
so that's why
the guy.
And like obviously there's the lure of what could be out there in free agency, but I don't know. I think he liked what happened in Toronto, minus them not moving on. But I think eventually he found his niche and what he needed to do, and I think it worked out quite well for both sides.
Yeah, I think it's a similar situation to Lyubushkin, where it's like as long as he's not asked to do too much, like if they had plans on bringing him back as a top 4 guy, nope, don't think that's going to work out. But if he's okay with taking third pair money, then sure, I think it makes a lot of sense. I was struggling to come up with like what a contract might look like for Joel Edmondson, though. Like that's where I do kind of struggle. Like he's coming off of a 4-year deal where he was making $3.5 million per. Like, is Edmondson still a $3.5 million guy in your opinion? Like, are you willing to pay your third pair guy that?
No.
Your number 5, number 6 guy that? That's where I kind of get a little bit like 37%, I think, is where I'm at with Edmondson. I'm not sure they're willing to pay that. And it seems like, but at the same time, I guess, size is becoming a much larger commodity in hockey, it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And Edmondson brings that. So maybe they do pay up a little bit for that type of size, and it's someone that they know and that they're comfortable with. So perhaps they do kind of say, all right, if you want to just sign back another 2-3 years and we could re-up at that 3 to 3.5, somewhere in that range. I could see it happening. But at this point, I think it's a tad less likely than likely for him to sign. That's where I'm at.
I don't think that's wrong to think that. I think they would like to have him back, but again, the numbers got to make sense, right? You got to consider what role he plays, unless they envision him in a higher role, which I don't know. Like you got Benoit back, you got McCabe, you got Riley, so you got to think of where he's fitting, as you said. Third pairing is kind of the only realistic spot right now.
Right, third pair, lefty. That's where, if you're signing back, that's where Edmondson's role is, and he's got to be paid in accordance to that role. We'll see what the Maple Leafs end up doing. The last update we've heard is there is interest from both sides, but Edmonton might want to see what's out there and could be a bit of a circle back option for both parties if neither finds the deal or the player that they're looking for. All right, last player is going to be goaltender Martin Jones. What are the odds that Marty Jones returns to be probably the third goalie again? I doubt this team is looking at Marty Jones as a number 2. But Martin Jones, would he come back as another third goaltender and maybe have to play in the minors a little bit? I'm low on this one. I'm probably like 21% that Martin Jones would want to do that again. I think there's probably some team that might be willing to give him another shot as a number 2 somewhere. So I'm going to be low at 21%.
That's my opinion. I'm like at 15%. You said it right there. Third goaltender. He's probably going to say, I kept you guys afloat while both your other goaltenders weren't able to play.
Yeah.
Like legitimately one was hurt and the other one could not play in the NHL. That to me, there are too many teams that, yeah, I know they're not going to look at Martin Jones and say he's their savior for their goaltending situation, but he can be their backup. I especially a team that's going to need to go for a cheap backup because their other goaltenders are going to get a little bit more of a boost, right? Like I see, I can name like 3 teams off the top of my head. I think Winnipeg would definitely, if they don't get Brossoit back, they could look at Martin Jones.
Vancouver Stolars leaves Florida. Martin Jones, backing up Bob's.
They're right. I don't know if Alex Lyon is sticking around in Detroit, but like Detroit could be another option as well. Buffalo need a veteran goaltender in there somewhere with the 2 younger guys.
Well, but that's where you're looking at like they probably would rather give Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Devin Levi starts and he becomes a third goalie again for Buffalo. Maybe, I don't know. Possibly they want to put Levi in the minors for the year, I guess, but they didn't seem to want to do that much this season. I guess we'll see what happens there. You brought up an interesting name, by the way, really quickly. I want to get to this before we break and get into some draft talk. Laurent Brossoit, you brought up, and his name's been kind of circulating out there as a player of interest for the Toronto Maple Leafs. James Myrtle, last week, I think on his podcast with Jonas Siegel, they had talked about it, and then he wrote about what the Leafs might be able to do with their cap space today, and discussed how if they, instead of trading for a higher priced free agent goaltender, they could settle for a Laurent Brossoit, and that leaves them more money to do more things on the blue line. He seems to be really beating that drum, and seems to be suggesting that there could be some interest on both sides. Laurent Brossoit supposedly trying to go somewhere where he can start as many games as possible, and where he can, I guess, be in a tandem and also, a winning team, a playoff team. Toronto does check those boxes, so it kind of makes some sense. Are you in on Brossoit, or would you be in on a Brossoit Wall tandem next year? Is that enough in your eyes?
The only way is if they are really comfortable that Wool's going to do it's like a 60-40 split. But even then, like Brossoit was good in Winnipeg, but if you look at his numbers, even like outside of Winnipeg, even like certain years, like they're very up and down. And Winnipeg was a very good defensive team this year, especially in the regular season. So you got to be very careful when you just look at the numbers. I think if the only way you go about it is if you really feel like the trade options like are just way too pricey, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the idea of going for a goaltender like Brossoit because that feels like you're trying to go buy. Like I think Myrtle or somebody was saying like $3 million potentially for like a Brossoit. Like, is he worth $3 million? Like that.
Well,
that's a tough one to figure out there.
A couple of years ago, I think he just signed like 1.8875, I believe, was the last deal he just signed with Winnipeg this past year. But he did sign like a 2-year deal with Vegas a couple of years ago to kind of be a bit of a split starter. Didn't necessarily work out that way, obviously, due to a couple of reasons. But I think he did end up signing for in and around $2.5 million when he did that. So I could see, between 2.5 and 3 million for a guy who is going to come in and be a tandem goaltender. That sounds about right to me, I would say. That's like if you believe that he can be a 1A, 1B type goalie. Like that sounds about right. A 1 or a 2-year deal, short term, see if it works. I wouldn't go long term with it, but 1 or 2 years, 3 million per could be easy to get out of if it doesn't work out. It wouldn't be the worst idea. Among the free agent goalies, that's probably one of the better ones, I would say. I still may prefer a trade route. Like Philip Gustafson is an interesting piece. He's also a younger piece, controlled in and around the low $3 million AAV range. But in terms of not having to pay anything, Brossoit would be a decent little consolation, I suppose. But you're also rolling the dice that Joseph Woll hopefully stays healthy for basically the full season. So we'll see what ends up happening on that front. All right, let's take one more break. Let's come back. Let's get into a little bit of draft talk. The Leafs targeting apparently 6 players at the draft whom they spoke with. We'll tell you who they are on the other side. It's Mike DiStefano with David Morisuti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NHL Finals, the NBA Finals, and more, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from the Finals MVP, the Conn Smythe winner, and who's going to hit one out of the park. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morisuti with you. And the PWHL draft was last night, actually. Sarah Fillier, the Canadian, went #1 overall in the second ever PWHL entry draft. Julia Gosling was our Toronto Sister Leafs first-round pick, so congratulations to them. And congratulations to all the women that were selected and will embark on their PWHL journeys next season. As for the NHL draft, we're just a couple of weeks away from that in Las Vegas at the Sphere. It is going to be fantastic. I was hoping to get out there, Dave. I really, really was, but my sister's having her first baby. It's like the first, grandchild, first baby of the family. So I couldn't not be there, for the birth of, I guess, of my nephew. So I decided to bow out of draft weekend at the Sphere, but man, I'm gonna have crazy FOMO. I know a lot of people going down there. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Macklin Celebrini, did you hear what he had to say at the NHL scouting combine about his status for next season?
I had heard some rumblings. I didn't actually read like what he specifically had to say, but yeah, I know he raised a few eyebrows about kind of his plans for next year.
Yeah, so says he hasn't ruled out a return to Boston University. I guess keep it up with the percentage odds game. What are the odds you think that actually happens? Or is that just what we like to call in the biz lip service? Because I think we heard very similar
Yeah,
things from Connor
I think it's
Bedard
lip
a year
service.
ago. Yeah, I'm going to go with
Yeah, I think it's lip service. You get a
3%.
chance because every scout I've heard analysts talking about Celebrini is like, yeah, this guy's going to play in the NHL next year.
Dude, this guy torched college. Torched 34 goals, 64 points in 38 games, won the Hobie Baker winner as the top college player. Like, what else does he have to learn? Like, can he even develop anymore in college? He's already the best in the class. He needs to now face, men. He needs to face better competition to better himself at this point, I think. 3% for me. 3% odds of him going back.
Go 1%.
Yeah, honestly, you're probably closer than I am. $1, Bob, $1. The only thing is, like, if he feels so strongly about winning a national championship, like his team got knocked out in the semifinals at the Frozen Four, like that's the only reason to go back. It's not for development purposes. It's
No.
legitimately if he's going to want to win a natty. Like we saw Matthew Nyes go back, where it's like he could have came out. Was he NHL ready at that time? Probably not. Maybe AHL. So that's a bit of a different situation. But yeah, I think that's a little lip service there. So also at the combine, Toronto reportedly met with 6 different players last weekend in Buffalo, and I've got the list right here, and I'll tell you who they were. So Cole Eiserman, left winger, although Cole Eiserman's like a top 10, top 15 ranked everywhere. So I'm not sure why they were talking with Cole Eiserman. I doubt that he is going to slide to them at pick number 13, but he was someone that they spoke to. He spoke with Andrew Basha. He's from the WHL Medicine Hat Tigers. They spoke with Lucas Pettersson from the Swedish Elite League. They spoke with Jack Pridham from the BCHL's West Kelowna Warriors. If that name sounds kind of familiar to you, Jack Pridham, it's because he is the son of Maple Leafs capologist and assistant general manager Brandon Pridham. So that's kind of funny that they were speaking with Brandon Pridham's son at the combine. Thank you.
Yeah.
And they also spoke with EJ Emery, and they spoke with Stian Solberg. So, of those players, Jack Pridham, Lucas Pettersson, Andrew Basha, EJ Emery, Stian Solberg, and Cole Eiserman. I know that you've done a little bit of reading up on some of these players, and we've started to do a little bit of brushing up on this draft class as we'll start to kind of dive a little deeper into them as the next couple of weeks come through. We'll start doing some player profiles and whatnot of like our top 10 targets that the Maple Leafs might be targeting at pick 23. These are obviously some of them. If they're meeting with them at the draft, is there one that kind of sticks out to you that interests you a little bit, Dave?
Well, like the first one, and we did our among the Locked On hosts, we kind of did a bit of our own mock draft, and like EJ Emery was one that stuck out to me just because he seems like the prototypical Brad Treliving draft pick, right? Right shot defenseman who's big, although not exactly offensively gifted, but I think the Leafs have kind of ignored a player like him in the draft especially higher up. They've gone with guys with size, just hadn't really been willing to use a higher pick on them.
Yeah,
So
I
I
agree. He was the guy. We both kind of. It was funny. We didn't have I guess we realized we were up on the clock late at night, and you're like, "Oh, we're on the clock for our locked on draft," which I think is coming out relatively soon, the first mock draft. And we both, I shot to you right away. I was like, "This EJ Emery guy kind of interests me," and you're like, "I was thinking the exact same thing."
yeah.
And we sent the pick in. So EJ Emery is kind of the first one that both of us it kind of stuck out to us as a Brad Treliving guy. So I think the way you phrased that was 100% correct. I mean, 6'3", 185 pounds. So he's got a big frame to still put on weight. He's got an 80.75-inch wingspan, which is the third largest at the combine. He is committed to the University of North Dakota for next season, which is a pretty solid school. It's a school I
Yep.
believe Jake Sanderson go to North
Yes, he
Dakota.
did.
Yeah, Jake Sanderson went to North Dakota, so pretty good school. He also had the lowest body fat among all of the people that were there at 3.6% body fat, and he was just the combine darling overall. Crushed the jumps at the combine, and he had just tremendous lower body strength. And was also top 3 in testing his right side agility testing. So and as a right shot defenseman, I guess that makes sense. A little bit better going to his right. So, and you mentioned the fact that he's not offensively gifted. Yeah, 0 goals, 16 assists for the U.S. National Team Development Program. So, not a lot of offense to his game, but a pure defensive shutdown type of guy. Projects as a future top 4 shutdown defenseman, which is exactly what the Maple Leafs have been clamoring for years. So EJ Emery is definitely an extremely interesting prospect if he's there at number 23 for the Maple Leafs. One other guy who does also interest me is this Stian Solberg guy. He's a left shot defenseman, but he's starting to rocket up a lot of boards. I'm not sure he's going to be there when the Leafs pick at 23. He's 18 years old. He's 6'2", 200 pounds already. He played in Norway this past year, which is why he wasn't necessarily known by a lot of people this past season. Just 15 points. He had 5 goals, but 15 points in the top tier Norwegian league. Real late riser here in this draft process because of it, but really excelled at the combine and a lot of the athletic testing as well. So, and the one thing that I thought was also interesting, he tested number 1 in both left and right side agility tests at the combine. So, although he's a left-handed defenseman, being able to test number 1 in both of those agility tests makes me think he could potentially play both sides and maybe flip and play the right side if he's able to skate to his right as well as he is to his left. He's very mobile both ways. So that's also kind of interesting. So that's another player who kind of caught my eye. Stan Solberg and EJ Emery. So those are 2 players that I'm going to be doing a little bit more research into as 2 guys who early on, I guess, are the 2 favorites for me at the upcoming draft for the Maple Leafs. But as the next couple of weeks go on, Dave and I are going to be player by player. Each day we'll kind of have a new guy starting next week. We're going to unveil our top 10 players that we want the Maple Leafs to take with that 23rd pick. And we'll kind of start unveiling that list and going prospect by prospect, day by day, starting next Monday. So we'll dive a lot deeper into some draft content starting next week. All righty. I think that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast, unless you've got anything else you want to say, Dave.
No, actually, I was just going to mention that Solberg actually went a little higher on Sam Cosentino's mock draft. He went up to 18. So you got eyes on a guy who might go a little earlier, but
I know he Craig Button ranked him number 5, the 15th best prospect. This was a guy who's nowhere near like first round pick, like earlier in the year. Like I said, late riser, he's rocketing up boards. I'm very interested in him, but I doubt he's going to be available come that day. But we'll see. We'll dive more into him at some point next week. He's definitely going to be in our top 10. So we'll have a bit more of a deep dive in where his rankings are, what his strengths are, and kind of maybe where his ceiling and floor is in terms of draft status. So we'll get to all of that next week here on the show. But that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morris Sudi. Follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. Remember, we're doing a mailbag on Friday, so be sure to leave your questions down below here on YouTube or reach out to us on Twitter with your questions, and we'll get to those on Friday's episode of the podcast. We'll be back with another episode for y'all tomorrow, though. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.